Okay, good morning, everybody. This is Discipline Hustle, and we also have a very distinguished guest with us today. We have Dominik Lysek from PharmaTrail. He is the Executive Director and CEO of PharmaTrail. And PharmaTrail is a clinical trial data-based, I guess you're working on a software or have a software, and it's blockchain-based, which is very interesting to me. And I think very interesting to the listeners. So, Dominik, thank you for coming, and take it away.
Hey, thank you for having me. So, just generally to PharmaTrail, we're an electronic data capturing software. Practically, we capture the data from clinical trials, because for most of the companies that are doing clinical trials, their clinical trial data is their core value. Whether you're a pharma company that tries to bring a new drug to the market, or whether you're a medical device and you try to be acquired by some kind of larger corporate, your clinical data really defines your value. And with the blockchain in the back, on the one side, we secure that data, but actually more important is we provide transparency and trust into the data. Because if you talk to a corporate or to a regulator, it is all about that they actually trust that data. And the blockchain is absolutely made for that, because you cannot erase anything on the blockchain. You always have a full audit trail. And that's, by the way, also why it's called PharmaTrail and not PharmaTrail.
Gotcha.
Perfect. So now this isn't your first go around with startups and things like that, right? So tell us your origin story. Remember, we talked about it before we got on, right? Is you went to school, you did this, maybe something inspired you to take startups on and things like that. So tell us, Dominik, what is your origin story? How did you get to where you are right now?
Yeah, so my origin story really started back in probably around 2007 or 8. I was in a meeting when today a very good friend of mine, Jennifer Kirkham, she presented a technology, something completely different, not software. It's a so-called self-assembling peptide. I was working for a dental biomaterials company at the time. And I'm a chemist by training. I have a PhD in structural biology. And I just was absolutely intrigued by that technology. And in 2010, I founded a company called Credentis, developing a product called Cure Don't Repair, which is really the first enamel regeneration mechanism. So just for the layman or the laywoman, practically when you have early tooth decay, you actually don't need to just hope that it stops or have a filling. You can actually heal that tissue, and you can make that tooth, repair itself by really supporting the natural remineralization mechanism that the body has. Mm-hmm. So I did this for 10 years. We developed that. We ran all the clinical trials, and at the beginning, I told you about all the trust in the trial data, and that is really where I was kind of stuck very often. We ran 7 or 8 clinical trials. We got great data, and we were met with a lot of skepticism. And we were able to sell Credentis in 2020. And when I left there a couple of years later, my old boss from a pharma company that I briefly worked for approached me, and he said, look, I have this idea of doing clinical trial software with a blockchain in the back. So practically to secure that data, to provide that trust and that transparency in the data. And I was intrigued. I first came in as an investor, then as a board member, and then I took over as CEO. And it's a great journey. I love the healthcare space. I really think that this gives a real benefit to the community, because trust is so solely needed. Also, if you listen into what is happening in the world, there is so much skepticism when it comes to clinical trial data. Really providing that trust into data that is immutable, I think that is a real benefit and a real USP that the industry can really value.
Oh, that makes sense. That makes sense. So let me ask you this. So we're gonna go way back to school before you got into the startup stuff, right? So when you went into school, like you said, you're a chemist, right? What was you went into school to be a chemist and then to do what? Like, what was your goal when you went into school before the startup, right? Because you didn't know
good.
about these things.
Yeah.
Right?
No, it's absolutely, it's a very good question, Reggie. So I did my undergrad degree in Edinburgh, Scotland. I actually grew up close to Munich, so I moved over to the UK, to Scotland. I highly enjoyed that. I wanted to be a chemist. And when, after 5 years in Edinburgh is a fantastic city to do your undergrad in. I can only recommend it, but it is a little bit far away. You know, family having, the British would say, on the continent. So in Germany, I was kind of looking for a PhD position a little bit closer. I really liked pictures. I'm dyslexic to a certain extent. So if you know anything about dyslexia, people that are dyslexic, they see and think in pictures.
Interesting.
So anything three-dimensional is something that appeals to me. So what I ended up doing was structure determination by NMR at the ETH, the university in Zurich. Fantastic education. And this is really where the feeling for, protein structure, for function came in. And then by serendipity, I ended up in clinical research, mainly because I was trying to find my first job out of uni, and, you take what you get.
Yeah.
Yes.
And the technology that I saw for Credentis, it really brought those two worlds together. I was doing dental and dental implantology, and dental kind of stayed with me for most of my professional career. And at the same time, I had that education in structural biology, in structure function, in what actually you can do with these absolutely beautiful systems. And I always say I wasn't the inventor of the technology. The technology came from the University of Leeds. And I mentioned Jen Kirkham before. She was really one of the inventors. However, what I did is putting those two things together, practically seeing the application in dental in order to really bring a patient benefit. Because let's face it, everything that we do in the healthcare industry, if there is no patient benefit, we shouldn't be doing it.
Right.
Yeah, I agree.
So, okay. So sorry, Rob, I'm just intrigued by this. So what I heard too as part of this is the, PharmaTrail came from a problem that you saw and said, we need to fix this. And then you said, let's fix it, right? So you figured out, so PharmaTrail kind of happened because you were in one part of this world, and you're seeing this problem, and you said, this needs to be fixed. And you said, let's figure out how to fix it. You fix it because you guys needed it, right? Because you saw that there was a need, and now PharmaTrail, now everybody that needs it can utilize PharmaTrail, right? So it's like you found a problem, you solved it. And that's
absolutely. It's really a solution out of the industry for the industry.
Yeah.
Okay. Because we came, Thomas, the actual founder and the chairman of PharmaTrail, he ran a biotech startup. Okay. So for him, it was much more the regulatory process in order if you have more trusted data, more trust from the FDA or the EMA, you get faster regulatory approval. And that is a benefit by itself. I come from the startup world and from the medtech world. So there it is much more the businesses, the business partners, whether it's acquirers or commercial partners, that if they trust your data and they have confidence in it, they can go out and practically market your products faster. And just to give you a little bit of an anecdote, we were probably around 2015, we were sitting with a large corporate in the space. And they were like, look, we're completely intrigued. We love the system, but we want to run our own trials before we start marketing it. Okay, you might think that isn't that bad, but a trial takes 3 years. So
Wow.
You're going to have 3 years till revenues. And that means that the value that corporate put to the company was extremely low ball, because the whole financials collapse if you need a waiting time for 3 years to get to market. You see, and that is really where I see, if they would have really had full confidence in the data that we had already back then, I think they would have wanted to roll this out immediately, and they probably would have offered us 3-4 times as much to acquire the company, and we might have actually ended up with a deal, which we didn't. So there is, this real kind of benefit, because I started off with saying that for these small companies, their clinical data is their core value. Mm-hmm. It is really, because many of them don't have any sales. In pharma, they never have any sales before they have regulatory approval. But also for medtech, many of them, they build up technological potential. And that clinical trial data is their core value. So it also makes sense to completely protect it.
Yeah, and one of the things that you just bring up, and it's a good little segue here, I think you underestimate your value to a company, because there are very few scientists that can translate Wall Street language into their business. And I've seen that a couple times. They're very good scientists. They know their product, or they know their research, but they don't quite understand the practicality of bringing something to market and attracting money, doing all those things. I find that very interesting in you, that you have bridged that gap. And I really do appreciate that, coming from Wall Street, and understanding, that you can articulate that in a certain way, so that, the researchers, the scientists, and people like that who probably aren't familiar with that world are becoming more comfortable in that world, thanks to people like you. So, a very big kudos to you for bridging that gap. But tell me a little bit about that. What have you learned along the way in dealing with these Wall Streeters as you talk to them about raising capital and things like that? Because you started as a startup, and then you bring things to market, and so tell a little bit about that story too. So
first of all, the kudos actually pass on to the mentors that I had, because obviously, as you said, I'm a scientist. I learned this from somewhere. I had a fantastic chairman at Credentis, and actually the whole board, and another board member who has really become a great personal friend. And the two of them, they really, they were my mentors throughout those 10 years. And they helped me to translate that. So Erich, the chairman, he was actually a medic. He went into venture capitalism, but he actually, considering that we were a startup and we were an angel investment, he put a lot of professionalism in there, because he came from that venture capital world. Gerard, he actually mostly works in private equity. So you have the even larger consortiums. And he found his niche in dental actually after normal retirement age. He's and I really have to say he's been the best mentor you can imagine, and he's become a great friend. And by actually going through those meetings, not alone. That's what I actually tell a lot of the startups that I'm involved with. Do not do these meetings with Wall Street, with investors on your own.
Yes.
It's incredibly hard. It's always incredibly hard to stay concentrated for 2 hours. But if you're then not even 100% familiar with that, it's really tough. Whereas if you are two, and especially, for me, a great board member is like a little bit like an elder statesman. They really provide impact. And if they don't say a lot, but when they say it, it really brings value. And especially Gerard and I, we did this so often. We really had this great collaboration, really partnership going. I don't want to say good cop, bad cop, because that's not really what it is, but it's kind of, I can focus on the science, and then he would interject there at the with the financials. And today I do that similarly with Thomas, who is also an economist, the chairman there.
Okay.
Perhaps I'm a little bit further today, but I think it's one of the advices I would give to all the startups. Don't try to do it yourself. Try to find yourself a team that complements you, because you can't know everything. It's not possible.
That's true.
And also, it's not credible. That's, I think, probably the key.
No, I think that makes sense. And I think this is stuff that Rob and I tell to some of the people that we're talking to is, number one, the one thing I got was just, you don't know everything. Always be open to learn, right? That's what I get from you. And then also, Rob is a big proponent on this, is mentor, right? Find a mentor. Like you said, it's just, they don't know everything, but they're there to help you and guide you. Like I said, I know Rob is very, 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 very big on the whole mentor thing, but I think that's important to kind of point out. It's always, you don't know everything, so be open to learn, but then also really find a mentor out there.
No, that's fantastic advice, Dominik and Reggie. Both of you guys kind of bring up good points. But Dominik, I think, I very, very, very infrequently meet people like you where they're very good at their, their core, being a chemist and things like that. But then you've transitioned into that and being a person who's very articulate in speaking the Wall Street language. And that's very hard to find. So again, kudos to you and your whole mentor, connection, because I think that makes a lot of sense. And you're very humble too. I would say that. I think the listeners will understand that's one of the dominating traits from you, is that having that humbleness about, you can't know everything. You can't do everything by yourself. Do it as a team. I think that's a very good, situation for yourself. And I can understand why you've been so successful in everything that you've touched. And I'm sure PharmaTrail is headed that way. So I think just some more questions, right, Reggie?
Yeah. So we're talking about how great everything is, but I know from my own experience, but I'm sure on your side, it's not all, candy and rainbows all the time, so there are some down times and really hard times. And, I always ask this for people is, what is your why? Because the why is, in my experience, is, that kind of keeps you going, like getting through that downtime and really, continuing to grow. You might not see it, but so the question is, what is your why? What keeps you going, Dominik?
I would say two things. It's, first of all, doing something that nobody has done before. And, I don't say going to the moon, which, might be fun, but might not be. But I meant more kind of bringing something into this world that hasn't been done before. So, for example, for me, I wouldn't be very interested in doing a Me Too product. It just wouldn't excite me the same way. And the second thing is really kind of healthcare and the health benefit that it brings to, the patients, the population, whatever it is. Those I think are my two whys that I would mention. Perhaps the one is my driver, and the other one is the reason why I'm in healthcare. But yeah, you're absolutely right, Reggie. If you don't have those drivers, it's going to be really, really hard to, go over those valleys that, where it's tough, where things don't work, where, it's all good and dandy having a business plan written out, but, as soon as you hit the market, somehow there are no sales and things like that,
Yeah. No, and I think, you hit on a great point, Dominik, that you've got to have that reason why you're doing something, exactly. And I think, again, you being humble as you are, if this, PharmaTrail, as you bring it out, I mean, think of all the drugs that are coming to fruition as, technology has been increasing. And there's such a need for these, and the speed at which things can work if they take on your software and take the compliance and get through the all the peaks and valleys of getting something to market. You would be helping mankind, bringing indirectly bringing some of these solutions to market a lot quicker to the general public. And longevity can happen. I mean, we're talking about that all the time. Many people are, I'm in the twilight of my career also. And, I think about that often, and I go, oh, I wish this drug would hurry up, because I hear about things that are out there, but they're not for the public yet. They haven't been clinically trialed. They haven't been, brought, all the things that our governments require for something to be safe. So I think that's probably a third thing for me, why I'm so such a supporter of PharmaTrail, because it makes sense to me that you can speed up the process, and it can be safer and quicker, and it can have some benefits to the investors too, or to the people that are bringing things in, these things to market. They can understand, that this thing will speed up the process.
Absolutely. I mean, we are living in a capitalist society, whether we like that or not. But there needs to be some kind of monetarization of the value. And, that's not a bad thing at all. It's, if you do something good for society, I think you should benefit for that. And you're right. I mean, it's simply even getting drugs or certain therapies earlier to market. That is a true patient benefit that people, hopefully, you will save, whether it's lives or just quality of life, or it doesn't really matter, but you bring some benefit to the actual population.
The greater good, as they all talk about all the time. Yes. Okay. All right, Reggie.
Yeah. So the other thing, you're talking about the trials and bringing things faster, to market. The question is, so how has the current economy and like some of the market trends, how has that affected what you're doing, your business?
Yeah. So generally, clinical trials and clinical trial software, especially, I think it already started around 2010, I would say. But it got a boost during COVID, because we had something called decentralized trials, where patients don't go into the office anymore or into the clinic for their treatments, but they actually do that at home. And it's actually tricky to get valid data for somebody who doesn't come into the clinic.
Yeah.
And I really wouldn't know how to do that without software. Also, the number of data points have increased a lot. Just think of, people wearing Fitbits and the amount of data that might be raised if the exactly. If the patients have a Fitbit or have a, some kind of a wearable device. So, I wouldn't even know how to do that on paper anymore. And this, paper was the standard when I did when I first started in clinical trials. So overall today, clinical trial is about $60 billion, of which 10 billion are software, not only the electronic data capturing, there are some other softwares as well. So it's really a quite substantial market. However, I think with something that we see in tech all over the place, the trust in the data and how the data is processed is an issue today. And then there is security, obviously. And the blockchain, that is really why the prognosis, if you look at market research, the prognosis of blockchain in healthcare is exploding, because it actually provides that security of the data. It provides the authenticity, the integrity of the data. It is really made for that. Just for anybody who might not be completely familiar, you cannot erase anything on a blockchain. You can only add, and therefore you always have a perfect trail, a perfect history of what you're recording. And that is made for clinical trials, because clinical trials are not about making mistakes, because the projects are so huge that mistakes always happen. It's about transparency, and that you don't try to hide those mistakes from the regulator or whoever the other stakeholders are. And obviously, again, the blockchain really helps you to show that, yes, you are showing that transparency. So I think these market trends are definitely in our favor. I'm sure that in 10 years' time, blockchain will be the standard within that clinical trial community. Generally, the economy, we're all struggling a little bit. Private equity, especially high-risk investments, are certainly down compared to pre-COVID years, or even 2021. I think it's coming up again, but it's been harder raising funds today than it was 15 years ago, at least in my perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would agree with you there, that interest rates, are all the rage. Everyone's talking about those. So, what happens with the U.S. side, tends to affect the whole world. So, as you've learned, everything kind of leads to, decisions made in Washington. So hopefully things will be on the brighter side. I do agree with you. Things are getting a little bit easier and better. So keep our fingers crossed and see what happens.
Yeah. And, we're, for good or for bad, I think for US investors, it's the good. We're in Switzerland. So the Swiss franc is, it's a little bit of a refugee currency. So whenever there is uncertainty, people buy Swiss francs. It's a little bit like gold.
Mm-hmm.
So generally, actually, if you would have invested in PharmaTrail about a year ago, you would have made just 10% on the exchange rate.
Wow.
And
that alone,
I don't see that going in any other direction in the near future, because until the markets fully calm down, I think that will take quite a bit of time.
I agree.
No, that makes sense. All right, so a few more questions here, Dominik. So hindsight's 2020. For yourself, hey, like you just said, hey, if you invested, here, you would make 10% just on the. So the question for you
just on the exchange rate, yeah.
Yeah. So the question for you is, what's that one piece of advice you would give yourself before you got into all of this, right? Is there something along the way that you said, man, if I just did this or this, we would be wherever, right? Like, what's that one piece of advice you'd give yourself?
That is actually really hard. For me personally, I think in my very first business plan, I said that we would actually need to do clinical trials for 3 years, because that was, back in 2011, when you get regulatory approval for medical devices before you actually start on the market, because you do all the trials as post-market. Mm-hmm. And in my original business plan, I really had in there, we're going to do trials for 3 years. We're going to get the clinical evidence. We're going to show the clinical and the patient benefit, and then we're going to go out market. And investors kind of said, look, you have a product, you have regulatory approval. Why don't you go out and sell it? And I got persuaded to go out and sell, and I regretted that. We should have really done those 3 years. We should really have shown the patient and the clinical benefit, because let's face it, 90% of startups are not going to get sold on revenues. They're going to get sold on tech. So again, I come back to this valuable clinical data. If I would have had that, that company might have been picked up a lot earlier. Now in software, it's a little bit different because there is hardly any IP. You really need to go fast to market. But if you transfer that to tech, it's a little bit, really listen to the user. Usability is absolutely essential. You can have the nicest blockchain in the back. If your software is not user friendly, people won't use it. And that is perhaps, the transfer that I would see today is, do your homework and plan for that to be done, because the first time around it's not going to be perfect.
That makes sense. So, you made me think of a question. In regards to like the whole medical side of things and investors, is there sometimes like a clash is not the right
conflict
term.
Yeah, there's a conflict.
The investor saying, hey man, get to market, we need to generate some revenue versus so how do you overcome that kind of stuff? Like, how do you say, hey, hold on guys, like, yes, we know this is a great product, but we got to do the trials before we go to market, so you guys aren't going to make anything until we get to market. How do you overcome that kind of thing?
On the one side is good communication.
Okay.
Obviously bringing your investors on board, really telling them what you're planning to do, why you're doing it, that is certainly incredibly important. Sometimes they're just needs. If you run into a time of, where funding isn't easily got, you might be stuck in having to go for revenues because that's your only way of actually getting money. So again, perhaps your solution out there is to, communicate better and tell them why you're doing this. And if they understand, they will also invest the money because they see the value. And that is something that is common to all investors. If they don't see the value, they're not going to put their money in. But that's a continuous process.
So have you come across a time where you need the money, but in your gut you're saying this investor is really just so focused on the revenue that they're not gonna allow us to take the time to do you know what I'm saying? Like,
the risk. Taking the risk.
Yeah, I've been very, very lucky with the investors that I've worked with, I have to say. I have not had that where the investors pushed me for things, like really outright pushed that.
Right.
I mean, the story that I said before, that was also my inexperience. If I would have explained that better to them, I'm pretty sure my board back then would have agreed. And actually, it was the board who then kind of made us pivot and said, look, showcase, and who cares about revenues? But yes, I mean, obviously I hear those stories where, whether it's, investors are pushing for it. And I think it mostly comes if you have investors that might not know the healthcare market. They don't know how conservative it is.
Yes.
They might come from, I don't know, a market where there are lots and lots of innovators. And then that might be difficult. As I said, I've not been in that situation, and I'm highly grateful for that.
So have you ever had to say no to an investor?
Well, say no, yes, that happens, but not in a major topic. I mean, for example, if an investor asks you, I was in dental, so they were like, "Oh, you have to go talk to my dentist," and I was like, "Yeah, okay, I do that once." But when you bring the third one, at one point, I'm
What
sorry.
about no to an investment? You say, "Oh, hey,
That, to be honest, I think I have not, but that is the hardest thing to do, because normally rule number one is if money's on the table, you take it.
Sure.
Okay, because you never know what happens.
Yeah.
But if you have a bad gut feeling, let's face it, normally you're looking for an investment, so you're a little bit under a strain. So you're going to take pretty much any money that there is. And it's always nice hearing, oh yeah, you need to go pitch to VCs and then you can choose your investors. I know very few people that were in that position, that they had like three different offers from consortiums and then they picked one. It doesn't happen very often. So no, I haven't been in that situation, and it probably is incredibly hard. I think if you would need to do that, have the board on your side, really make sure that the main investors and the board, it's a unanimous decision why you don't take a certain investor in. And again, communicate well why you did that, because I'm sure you had a reason. And the valuation is important, but it is seldom the only reason why you wouldn't take an investor.
Yeah.
No, very sage advice. Yeah.
So then, the last two questions here. So what is that one piece of advice you'd give to, one of our viewers or listeners who wants to start their own business?
Yeah. And so on the one side, and this might sound paradox, be prepared, but don't be too prepared. Don't listen to too many war stories, because if I would have thought how hard those 10 years were at some point when I did Credentis, I'm not sure I would have done it. I mean, honestly, it's been hard. It's been hard on me. My wife was incredibly supportive, but it's I could have earned quite a bit more money having a good industry job. You wonder sometimes, why the heck are you doing that? Right. You also have a lot of freedom, and that I wouldn't want to miss. And that's probably why I'm still in it. But on the other side, be prepared. It's like really sit down, do a business plan, do a business case. Be sure that actually the product you are doing, or the service or whatever, it is actually scalable, and to an amount where there is that it really is that is valid for its own business. Because I mean, let's face it, if you have a product that costs $1 and you sell a maximum of 2 million a year, that's going to be a tough business to scale. I mean, and that doesn't mean that it is a bad product at all, but it might be a product that really belongs into a corporate straight away, or into another company, because for them it's a nice portfolio product. So I think that business plan and the business case, talking to the user, that you should do in depth before you start your venture.
Now, you've hit on a lot of points that we try to emphasize quite a bit. Learn, build, grow. Your whole idea around the mentors. And then, what you just said, discipline, hustle. Put some discipline into your hustle, right? That business plan, really looking at all the angles from different directions. And you can these days now. There's a lot of advice out there and it's very good advice that's talking about how to start a business and what angles to look at. So again, bringing that discipline, and then the idea of learn, build, grow. Learn first, build it, and then grow it. So scalability, like you said, is probably the most important thing to think about when you're doing a business. I was talking, and Reggie talks to me about this all the time. There's ideas, then there's a hobby, and then there's a business. In that order typically is how it happens. You have an idea, that sounds like a great idea, but try it out as a hobby. First, see what's out there, and then maybe you have a business. If you can put a plan around it and you can scale it, like you said, that's so important. So yeah, very sage advice, Dominik.
Yeah, no, Rob, completely agree. And actually, I enjoyed writing my first business plan. I thoroughly enjoyed, having all the interactions with the users, talking, in that case, to dentists, asking them about it. That was fabulous.
Yeah.
Fabulous.
It's a journey. Yeah. Really, it's all about. Yeah, I understand. Totally.
Yeah, we can tell you're passionate about what you're doing, and I think that's that's the one thing I always tell people. You got to have some passion behind it, because if you don't, then
who is? Yeah.
No,
you don't have it.
You might as well take a job, which is nothing wrong about that.
Exactly.
Not at all. But if you take that risk, if you take that dedication, because let's face it, it's not a 40-hour week. You're going to be thinking about it nonstop,
all the time. Yes.
All the time. You really need to want to do that.
Yeah, I agree. Awesome. All right. So our last question, we don't know what the question is. So
here we go.
I have a little random question generator here. I'm going to show that here. Hold on.
Okay, here it is.
Show up here. Yep. So there are really some completely random questions on here. So we're gonna give this a spin, and then we'll see what we got. So here we go.
Be prepared, Dominik. That we don't even know what.
Oh, here we go. Oh, this is an interesting question for Dominik, Mr. Going all over the place over here. So
freedom.
Yeah. What's one bucket list item you haven't checked off yet?
Actually, I haven't traveled as much as I would have liked. There are still plenty of places I would really like to see. It's really, I lived in the US, I lived in the UK, Germany, Switzerland now, and I traveled most of Europe and the US quite extensively. But Asia, South America, I really haven't seen much. And that's kind of my bucket list.
Awesome.
So Asia,
good luck.
Asia and South America. Watch out. Dominik is heading your way.
Right. Awesome. Well, Dominik, thanks again for joining us.
Yes. Thank you very much.
Very insightful.
Thank you for having me.
I think that there's going to be a lot of our viewers and listeners that can take some of your advice and like we said before, kind of take that next step in their own journey. Right. So, again, to our viewers and listeners, thanks for tuning in to the Discipline Hustle podcast. Remember to keep learning, keep building, and keep growing. And we'll catch all of you guys at the next episode.